All right, so now we would like to welcome Catherine and Deborah to the show. So what did you bring for us? We're so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having us. From the Rochester Museum and Science Center collections, we've brought some wonderful objects for you today. And this is one of my favorite objects, Deborah. This is a gavel that was actually used at the Second Women's Rights Convention. It was held in Rochester, New York, 2 weeks after the Seneca Falls Convention. And what's so special about this object is it was actually used by a woman, Abigail Bush, who was the very first woman presiding over a convention in mixed company, both men and women. So this is a very unique object.
To have men and women in a mixed company and a woman presiding, they called it a promiscuous assembly.
Can I ask a question before you go on?
Yes,
Why
indeed.
are you wearing the gloves?
Oh, thanks for asking. I'm wearing these nitrile gloves because they actually protect the oils on my hands from getting on the objects. So they're really both for the protection of the objects and for my own protection in case there's anything on the objects that could be dangerous for me, which of course there isn't on these particular objects, but in some cases there could be. So another object that we have that's very special is this beautiful brooch, and this was actually owned and worn by Susan B. Anthony. It was given to her on her 50th birthday, and that would have been in 1870, is that right, Deborah?
Correct,
yeah, and you'll notice, Deborah pointed this out to me, it's a rose brooch, and what's so cool about the rose brooch is that it was Susan B. Anthony's favorite flower.
It was, particularly yellow roses. Those were her favorites. Her second were pinks, or what we actually call carnations now. And the yellow rose became a symbol for the suffrage movement. And you would wear a yellow rose if you wanted to say to people you were for suffrage. You would wear a red rose if you were opposed to suffrage.
And this was given to her by someone who was a supporter of the cause, someone from Chicago. And I think you've mentioned before that so many of her personal things were actually given to her by others who were supportive of the cause.
Right, all of her resources she would put into traveling and making the speeches for the cause.
Wonderful.
Deborah, would men wear a boutonniere as well to support
Yes.
suffrage or not support it?
Yes, there's evidence that they did.
All right.
And
Not just
they
the
would wear
women.
pins and brooches and other things that they believed in the rhetoric of the jewelry and the things that they wore. They communicated messages.
And we actually have, I believe, a photograph of Susan B. Anthony wearing this very brooch, so perhaps we could take a look at that. It's a cabinet photograph that was in the collection of Emma Sweet, who later donated it to the museum. Okay, there it is. So if you can make it out, she's actually wearing this very brooch.
Right there under the white.
Yep.
Yep.
And she's about 50 years old, so this was just not too long before she got arrested for voting in
That's right,
1872.
1872. In Rochester, of course. So next we have, and you'll see this is more of our special archival housing. So this is a material called archival Tyvek. So we have this specially covered. It functions as a dust cover for this particular object. And this is a plaster plaque that's embedded here on another material that you might recognize from home. It's actually Teflon, so some of your cooking pans, right, are coated in Teflon, and that's a barrier for this object. But this is a plaque. On the back, it says copyright June 1897 by Mary S. Anthony, endorsed by the Political Equality Club of Rochester, New York. And this depicts Susan B. Anthony, of course.
Right, and Mary was her sister. And Mary was here in Rochester. She was a very well-known leader in the community, and she would do these things to help raise money so Susan could travel and make speeches and push for the cause.
So they sold those as souvenirs as well as to support the suffragette movement?
And then you'd hang it on your wall and people would know where you stood, that you were in support of suffrage.
And did Mary actually start the Political Equality Club?
She was a part of the group that originally started the Political Equality Club here. She was very, very famous. If she hadn't had such a famous sister than Susan, we would all know all about Mary Anthony. And she actually owned the house at the Susan B. Anthony Museum. Susan lived there with her, but Mary owned it.
Is she older or younger than Susan?
She's younger than Susan.
Okay.
Excellent. And then I think we're gonna do a little do-si-do, and I'm gonna show you some of the things that we have over here. So over here, again, we have special archival housing for these objects. This is a sash that you'll notice says Votes for Women. And this is silk, and you'll also notice that it was made by hand with a hand stencil. So you can see somebody took a lot of care to create this object. And you'll also notice there are a bunch of pinholes on the one side, so you can see it was very well used.
So someone would have worn it over their shoulder and down and then pinned it at the bottom, and they'd wear these in marches or events.
And we actually have, I believe, a photograph from the Albert R. Stone collection in the Rochester Museum and Science Center. Stone was the first staff newspaper photographer in Rochester, and here we have a photograph of women wearing suffrage sashes. And they don't actually know which street this was, but it was a parade of some kind, probably between, would you say that's probably between 1915 and 1917?
Would make a lot of sense, and they would be marching right downtown, trying to get attention to people, to tell them they wanted them to vote for suffrage.
And wearing the yellow, like you said, yellow, the yellow,
yellow,
rose
or you
was
notice in the photo they're wearing a 3-colored sash.
Yeah,
and it probably would have
like
been
3.
Yep,
Yeah.
it probably would have been purple, yellow, and white, and those 3 were the colors of the movement at that period in time.
And the yellow in particular is significant because Kansas's state flower is the sunflower, so the yellow represents the sunflower. And Susan B. Anthony, of course, was instrumental in, well, she was campaigning for the referendum in Kansas,
yes,
right?
Yes, and her good friend Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who was one of those who had the convention in 1848 in Seneca Falls, had a nickname, Sunflower.
Oh.
And then the color gets picked up in the yellow rose that becomes very popular for Susan later.
And then we also have another object just under this one. So this is a similar thing, but you see kind of the evolution in technology of these objects. So here we have a banner or pennant, and this one looks like it was screen printed, so probably not something that someone made at home, possibly something that was mass produced. And this one says, "Vote for women's suffrage November 2nd." And that, of course, refers to November 2nd, 1915. Is that right, Deborah?
Right. We thought that women were going to get the right to vote in New York in 1915. But it wasn't actually that close at the election, but it was on November 2nd that everyone voted.
Wow.
So then we had to wait till 1917 to pass the referendum.
And in Rochester, is it right that they did not vote to pass
No,
women's
Rochester,
suffrage?
the home of Susan B. Anthony and all the wonderful suffragists that we had, did not pass women's suffrage.
Wow.
The suffrage,
interesting.
There were a lot of reasons that people were for or against suffrage. Some people thought that if women voted, they would be too much entangled in politics, and politics was a dirty business. And so you would be tainted by getting involved with what was going on at the legislature.
And in fact, another object that we brought here today is this "Vote No on Women's Suffrage." So this is an example of something
And
that...
it's got the red.
That's right. So this is an interesting object because it was actually collected by someone that we know did vote in 1920 in the election in that year. So of course, once women nationally had the right to vote. So we're not sure if this particular owner, Marjorie Story was her name, was anti-suffrage at the time, or if she was just a collector of political buttons, as we know she also was. And she tells an interesting story. She told this story to her niece, who donated this object to the collection ultimately. She said that when they went out to vote in 1920, all the women in her household, her mother, her sisters, they got dressed up in dresses and hats, and they went out to vote. And her father said, "Where's everyone going? Who's going to make me dinner?" Which I thought was a funny story. And I think we also have photographs, again, from the Albert R. Stone collection that depict Mayor Edgerton in 1915. And you'll see he was a...
These are some of my favorite photographs.
These are really funny. He was hedging his bets, I guess, because we have him here in front of a tent that says, "I am opposed to women's suffrage." And then in contrast to that, we also have him in front of "I shall vote for the women's suffrage."
So he's taking those photo opportunities and he's hedging his bets.
That's right. And this was published in the Rochester Herald in 1915. And I think the headline said something like, you know, "Mayor Edgerton is quite the diplomat." He wasn't going to take sides.
Trying to appeal to all people.
That's right. And so, of course, you know, the struggle for women's rights continues, and as of 1979, when the Susan B. Anthony dollar was minted, this was the first depiction of a woman who is an actual woman and not a symbolic woman on U.S. currency, which I think is interesting. So here we also have an example of the Susan B. Anthony dollar.
And
When you mean symbolic, you mean?
So symbolic
Like
as
liberty.
in, yes,
Okay.
exactly, exactly.
a real person. It was wonderful in 1979. They actually released this coin from Rochester, New York, from the front steps of the Susan B. Anthony Museum.
Oh, wow. How fantastic.
And it was supposed to be the ideal thing because by then, soda pop in vending machines was close to $1. And so this was going to be just right. But right about the same time, they invented machines that could take paper dollars. And so people saw that this dollar looked a lot like a quarter in their pocket. But there were 830 million of them minted.
Wow.
Wow.
And some of them now have particular marks or errors, and they're starting to become quite collector's items.
Tooth Fairy used to drop them underneath my
We had someone who, we asked people to send them home several years ago, and we had one woman who sent a quarter that was all blackened, and it was taped to an index card, and she said, "My Susan B. Anthony dollar survived our family fire, and I want you to have it."
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's so nice.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you, Catherine.
Thank you
and
very
Deborah,
much.
for
Thank you
joining
so
us.
much.
This was really exciting.
You know,
Yeah,
people
it was. This
can
is
look
some
forward
great things.
if they're in Rochester this summer. We're going to have a wonderful display downtown at the public library that our number of organizations have all been working together. Catherine and I have been working together with other organizations here in town, and they can come see the display about women's suffrage right here in Rochester.
And rocksuffrage.org would be a wonderful website to look to for information about that and other events that are happening.
That
Okay,
sounds great.
Thank you so much.
If you would like to learn more about the suffrage movement, visit our website, homeworkhotline.org. And now, stay right there. We will be back in a second.